I was looking at the top. I didn't look down at the bottom. Good evening, everyone. This is the March 25th, 2013 meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Burnsville. Good evening, staff.
Good evening.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
The first item is to call the Planning Commission to order and to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I would like to add an item to the agenda, if you don't mind, sir.
Go ahead.
I would like to call this item 2A, and the appointment of the vice chair going to be 2B.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we add that to the agenda.
All right. Hearing that motion, any seconds?
Could we have some clarity? So 2A is appointment of
Acting chair.
acting chair, and 2B is appointment of
Acting
acting
vice
vice chair. Okay.
Hearing that
Seconded.
motion, seconded by Mr. Julik.
Commissioners, I do also have, staff has another change, that we would also eliminate Commissioner White as alternate on the agenda here moving forward.
Okay.
Any motion?
I move to I move to remove Commissioner Joey White as an alternate commissioner.
No, Mr. Chair, on a point of
Same
order,
motion.
we have a motion before
Oh, yeah.
for the addition to the agenda we have not voted on.
Do we-
Take, as long as everybody's agreeable to the friendly amendment, you can take
Yep.
the vote.
All right. Well, we'll vote on the first amendment to make 2A and B acting chair and acting vice chair.
That's correct, sir.
All right.
So moved.
So moved. And voting?
Moved and seconded.
It's moved and
Just
seconded?
seconded, so we can vote. Yeah.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say. Hearing none, it is passed 4-0.
Correct.
All right, the next item then would be to have a motion to move Commissioner White from an alternate to a permanent member.
Correct.
Any motion to that effect?
Just a second for clarity. Are we moving him to a permanent member from alternate, or are we
To a regular voting
a
member.
regular voting member? Okay, okay. I move to to instate Joey White as a regular commission member.
Second?
Second.
The moved by Mr. Julik, seconded by Mr. Singh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, passed 4-0. All right. The third item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 11th, 2013 meeting. Any changes from?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry.
have we voted on the,
Adoption of the agenda. I'm sorry, I missed that.
have we voted on the chair, the acting chair? We have not.
I thought we approved both.
No, we did.
Oh,
We
I'm
added them
sorry.
to the agenda.
We added to the agenda, not.
I'm sorry. You're correct. Apologize for that. Let's let's look at. Sorry, we should go back to one. I think adoption of the agenda.
Yep, that's right.
Any changes from staff? Other changes?
No.
Any further changes from
No.
commissioners?
No additional changes?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 4-0. Next item then would be 2A, the adoption of the acting chair.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we know that we are short of commissioners on the commission. Commissioner Titan has left. Commissioner Titan was the chair of the commission, and Commissioner Corey was the vice chair. I beg to move that Commissioner Corey be the acting chair until the next elections. And if I just can combine them, or the acting vice chair? Or,
That's fine. You can put the motion out there, and if
okay, let's take it one at a time.
Let's do one at a time, yeah. Right. Any discussion on that, or a second?
I second.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Singh, seconded by Commissioner Julik. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes 4-0. 2B then is to appoint a acting vice chair to the commissioner.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, one of our members has been around for quite a while, and I know he's very experienced, and I think he would do a good job in the event that you as chair, acting chair, is not available. It's my pleasure to nominate Commissioner Pat Julik to be the acting vice chair until the next elections.
Any comment or a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Singh, seconded by Commissioner Tahiri to appoint Commissioner Julik as acting vice chair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes 4-0. Right, which brings us to the third item of the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the March 11th, 2013 hearing. Any changes from staff?
None from staff.
Mr. Chair, I think Commissioner Julik was present at the last meeting. I see him not mentioned.
I think it's down after paragraph 2. It's Commissioner Julik joined at 6:33, I believe.
Paragraph 2. Okay, yes, thank you very much.
Correct.
Any other changes? Hearing none. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for Inland Ryan LLC has submitted an application for a PUD amendment for a new pylon sign at the Byerly store located at 401 County Road 42 East. Mr. Slania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. The application in front of you tonight is a public hearing. It's for a PUD amendment. The subject site we're looking at is the Byerly's on County Road 42. You'll see the store here, the adjacent shopping center right here. Both properties are owned and operated by Inland Ryan LLC. The applicant does not, or I should say the shopping center does not currently have a pylon sign along County Road 42. Due to their zoning as B2, they are limited to monument signs only, which means the maximum height of any sign they can have on the site is 6 feet tall. They do have an existing monument sign in this location. It is shared between Byerly's and other tenants within this shopping center. Because of increased competition, increased traffic along 42, the applicant is proposing a pylon sign in the northwest corner of the site, and this would require a number of deviations. As I stated, first off, because of the zoning district, the sign to exceed 6 feet is a deviation. There is an illumination requirement that I'll get to in a minute, get to the details, as well as the off-premise signage, because again these are two parcels. The shopping center, because it is a PUD, is able to have signage on another site. Actually, it's not so much a deviation. It is allowed through PUD so long as the Planning Commission and City Council acknowledge it. The applicant had also requested a reduced setback. Again, here's a close-up of the site. You can see County Road 42, the sidewalk along 42, the existing parking lot. Here are the property lines. The ordinance requires any sign exceeding 20 feet in height be 20 feet setback from the property line. In this situation, the applicant had proposed a 12-foot setback rather than a 10. Staff feels there is significant area to shift that sign to the south to meet that setback. Staff is not supportive of the setback deviation because we feel there is the ability to meet that 20 feet. The site meets and exceeds the other requirements for the B2 district, the green space, the parking. There are no changes to building size, parking lot lighting, minimal changes to landscaping that we'll get to in a minute. We are specifically discussing the proposed pylon sign. As I indicated, there is a lighting requirement in this B2 district, and keep in mind B2 is neighborhood business, intended for corner stores, intended to be in close proximity to residential neighborhoods, and thus there is a requirement that the signage shut off at 11 p.m. or at whichever time the business closes, whichever is later rather than whichever is earlier. Byerly's closes at midnight. They are requesting the whole sign, the Byerly's portion, and the subsequent tenants underneath, that everything shut off at midnight. Because it is operating as one sign, being constructed as one sign, so forth, staff feels that's reasonable and is supportive of the deviation. The other item I'd like to discuss is the concept of the pylon signs in the B2 district. As I noted, it is intended to protect the residential neighbors around. In this situation, you've got commercial directly to the east. You have a church, which is, although zoned residential, may act more commercial in nature. Certainly, we're not dealing with bedroom windows or anything like that that would be impeded by the proposed sign. We're also along County Road 42, which is a substantial arterial running through Burnsville. The closest residential, you note, is far in the southwest corner of the this image. It's over 500 feet from the proposed sign. So although it is zone B2, we're obviously looking at a large grocery store along a principal arterial, surrounded by a number of uses that are not single family. The staff was supportive of the deviation. It's also important to keep in mind the grades do change. If I can find that image. This would be the side closest to County Road 42. As you move closer to the sidewalk, the right-of-way line, and the curb along 42, this increases in height substantially. So you are, I believe it's 6 feet, it may be 8 feet taller when you're on 42 than this portion of the parking lot where the proposed sign is. Obviously, you see the applicants got to accommodate for the grade with small retaining wall, and there will be a landscape planting island included in there. With that, Commissioners, staff is recommending approval of the application. This is a public hearing. The conditions that were outlined in your background are included. I see that I forgot one in my PowerPoint, that the applicant shall install a new tree to replace the one being removed. So in the background, page 6, or excuse me, in the background, page 7 of your packet, there were 3 conditions. I apologize if PowerPoint only has 2. Rick Plessner is here with Inland Ryan. He is available for questions should the Commission have any, and I will stand for questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Slania. Questions? Mr. Julich?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I'm a little bit confused why it's considered an off-premise sign. Is it because there's 2 lots there and it's off-premise for the
For the adjacent lot
For the
with the
adjacent.
shopping center.
Okay, all
I
right.
apologize on one of the other images, there was a lot line. It runs right through here and then up to 42.
Okay. And does the 20-foot setback require them to move the sign into, like, eliminating a parking stall or anything? Or is it, why is the applicant pushing for 8 foot versus the 20-foot required?
I believe for visibility, obviously, the closer you get to 42, there may be changes in grades. Staff believes this can be done without adjusting any of the parking, but should there be conflicts, the shopping center is overparked by ordinance, so if an adjustment needed to be made in the curb line, one stall could be removed. It would still be in compliance with the ordinance. Certainly, it's additional expense by the applicant.
So the actual setback right now, looking on that drawing, as proposed, is 18 foot from the side lot line, and
12 from the north property line.
so it just needs to move back and 2 feet to the east, roughly.
The
or
side lot line, or the side setback is satisfied. The 20 feet is only measured from the front.
Okay.
From the street side, I should say.
Okay.
So it could move directly south and satisfy the ordinance.
All right. Does the grade continue down? Is the concern that then they would have to go even higher to get the visibility, or?
No, I believe once you're in that parking, it may slope down slightly, but not as steep as it does between the curb line and 42.
Okay. And have you received any comment or feedback from any neighbors regarding the lighting?
Not regarding the lighting. Staff did receive a call from one of the neighbors. I know it was south and west of the shopping center, but I didn't get a specific address. They were more curious as to what the application was for. There weren't any concerns once we explained it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Singh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, Commissioner Julik asked a question about any feedback. Were the neighbors, Berean, and the houses, residential, especially the ones near to the Barley's parking lot there, were they informed, by letters, or did we have a public meeting or something?
They
to
are.
brief them on this?
They are informed by U.S. mail.
Okay.
Pursuant to the ordinance, property owners within 350 feet of the subject site. So certainly Berean, these houses in the corner, I'm not sure how far it extends, but it is 300 feet from the subject site.
Thank you. My concern was the lighting. If the applicant is asking for to go with the lighting until midnight when Barley is closed, I thought probably there might be concerns from the residents. So if they were informed and no one said anything or were not in agreement with it, I think I'll support that. Regarding the setback, I agree with staff that the applicant can move that setback a little bit, and it's a big sign. So if you're driving, I think on 42, you cannot miss it. I don't think it'll make so much of a difference to the applicant if it's moved back a few feet to comply with code for the setback. So I agree with staff on this, so I'll support the condition. Yes. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Slaney?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I just want to indicate there may be neighbors here tonight that want to comment. Certainly, I only heard from one, but there were others that received the notice.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Commissioner Tahir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, we are approving 10 feet PUD for the setback for the pylon sign, right? Additional 10 feet.
The way the condition is, the condition that was in the report, that would be corrected, so that would eliminate the setback deviation. If the commission supports that condition and you move it on to the council. So you're dealing with the height of the sign, the illumination, and the off-premise signage.
So by us going ahead with this, is that going to what I'm trying to say, make us more subject to future PUD approval for deviation on the setbacks for other pylon signs in future, or
No.
can they refer back to this? We'll say, well, we approved that, so other merchants may use or
This is certainly a frame of reference to keep in mind with the Planning Commission and Council. It doesn't obligate the city to any future approvals. It is specific to this site under these circumstances. Certainly other property owners can make that application, and the Planning Commission and Council will look at it case by case. To your point, I would say that's why staff is not supporting the setback, because there is space available to adjust it, eliminate that deviation, and although the height's non-conforming, the setback would be compliant.
Any, Mr. Julie?
So, thank you, Chair. Mr. Slaney. So just for clarity's sake here, for a PUD, I guess the bar for doing a deviation is considered lower than the bar for a variance in the case of a non-PUD.
It is. They are two different processes. What the Planning Commission and Council are obligated to review are two different sections of the ordinance.
So in the PUD, we have more latitude if we feel there's a public benefit.
Absolutely.
And that the deviation is acceptable in the overall scheme of the PUD.
Absolutely.
Any other further questions? Mr. Slaney, I just had maybe one or two. With the removal of the tree, I was just wondering is there any obstruction, such as a tree or anything, that would cause a problem if you move that sign back that extra 10 feet or 12 feet or whatever it is to be in conformance? Is there any issue there?
Staff looked at it. It is obviously the farther south you move it, there will be impact, but nothing substantial with an additional 8 feet. You'll notice Berean Baptist has some trees existing on their site, and the grade does affect it, but we're not dealing with 20 or 30 feet. Just a shift of 8 feet would make the setback compliant.
I think that was my only question. So, anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Slaney. Mr. Plesner, do you want to step forward? If you would state your name and address for the record, sir.
I sure will. My name is Rick Plesner from Inland Real Estate. We own the property, the Byerly's Burnsville property, so I think that's the best address for us. Our corporate office is in Oak Brook, Illinois, but we have a local office in Oakdale, 7117 10th Street North. I'm almost afraid to come up and say anything because I feel things are pretty positive about the sign, so I don't want to say anything that might change your mind. We did construct the monument sign a few years ago and got an awful lot of positive response from that sign, and that's a small sign in comparison, and that's one of the reasons why Byerly's has come to us and said, hey, listen, we've had such a good response from the smaller sign, we need to get out here. Byerly's has been our tenant and in the shopping center for 20 years. Their lease comes for renewal. We're negotiating right now. They've promised they've offered to stay another 5 years. We're trying to negotiate a longer term to keep them part of the Burnsville community for at least the next 10 years and hopefully 20. But we're discussing a 10-year extended term with them. And this is one of the conditions that they placed on us, that they said they want to make sure that we use our best efforts with the city to improve the signage, and that's why we're here. We think that we've put together a sign proposal that meets pretty much of what the requirements would be. We've reviewed the Planning Commission, city planners' recommendations. Even though we would love to have a sign as close to 42 as possible to take advantage of the visibility and not have the grade detract as much from the sign, if the Planning Commission so decides that they'd like us to follow the letter of the law, then we will, and we'll set it back to the 20-foot mark as Chris has recommended. We appreciate you listening to our requests, and hopefully we'll be able to get your positive approval and take the next step. If there's any other questions, please ask.
There is. Commissioner Singh, I think, has a question.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that you're trying to keep Byerly's there. I live walking distance, so I'm there almost 2 or 3 times a week. So I think I'm happy that you're willing to work with the commission and probably the city council on the pylon sign. You know, today I was there and I looked at the monument sign, and it was near to the snow, the mountain we had there, and you can hardly see the monument sign because of the snow that was piled there. I think the pylon sign will give you much more visibility, and I think working with Chris and staff, I commend you for doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, and so I'd like to open the public hearing for anybody who would like to step forward and comment or voice their opinion on the proposal that is in front of us now. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Comments? Open for discussion. Commissioner Julich?
Yeah, personally, I think it'd be good to have an additional sign there, because sometimes I come from the east, from the west, excuse me, and sometimes, there's a short turn in there, and sometimes I don't know exactly where it is, so I think that visibility would help people and actually make it a little bit safer for people finding the place. So I don't have any problem with it. I agree with the staff's position on satisfying the 20-foot setback. Looking at the application, I don't see a strong reason to go against staff's recommendation. So I support the plan with the conditions as recommended by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Julich. Any other comments or Commissioner Singh?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think I've already said that it's the main thing, the pylon sign, and I support it. It will provide more visibility for the entire shopping area there, and I think regarding the setback, I would support staff on that. So I support the condition. So I think I would support the application.
Great. Anybody else? Commissioner Thierry?
Yes, thank you, Jim. I do also support the applicant and staff recommendation. I want to make sure that the signage comply with all the city ordinance requirements as far as the material heights. We discussed setbacks, and beside that, I have one other question I was going to ask Mr. Plessner, sorry. Is this sign a prototype sign that your company or Byerly's provide for all their facility, all their stores, or is it a unique design for the specific locations, or is it just a prototype sign that you build them everywhere?
This sign was actually designed. We went through at least 4 or 5 different sign plans and presented them to staff, and staff was instrumental on saying no on 4 occasions, and finally came up with a final plan that combined a really strong sign with good environmental features, including the brick base and the planters and different colors and materials. So this is certainly not a prototypical sign for us. This is out of the box, much improved from what we would typically suggest.
To accommodate the building design is
A combination of the quality of the tenants that we have here in the city.
Thank you very much for your explanation.
All right. With that, I guess I would entertain a motion at this time. Go ahead, Commissioner Julich.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the application for the planned unit development amendment to install a pylon sign at the Byerly's grocery store at 401 County Road 42 East with the following conditions. 1, the property shall be limited to the existing monument sign and proposed pylon sign. 2, the applicant shall install a new tree to replace the one being removed. And 3, the applicant shall adjust the location of the sign to satisfy the 20-foot setback. Revised site plan will need to be submitted prior to release of any permits.
And a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Commissioner Singh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay. Passes 4-0. This will go to City Council, I believe, on April 5th, is it, Mr. Slaney?
It is it next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, yeah. I think it's April 5th. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck. The next item on the agenda, number 5, is the discussion of food trucks and vending ordinance review. And Ms. Faulkner.
Thank you, Commissioners. It seems like it's been a while since I've been here. So I'm
Wow,
happy
we
to
are
be
blessed.
here. I am here tonight to talk to you about mobile vending, just to give you a perspective on this. We talked to the council about this in February, and there were some requests that were made last year from some of our current mobile vendors that we have, and they wanted some changes to the ordinance. So council wanted to further talk about the issue, and we talked with council on February 12th. You may have seen that video or been at that meeting. And at that meeting, they gave direction to prepare a separate mobile vending ordinance. Right now, the city has an ordinance that deals specifically with like transient merchants and peddlers and solicitors, which actually are covered and administered by our police department. So while this isn't a zoning matter, the council did want your input on this. So we allow vending throughout the city with those transient merchants and peddlers licenses. We do have a policy that's kind of contradictory to that says you can't vend in the right-of-way. Of course, you've seen many conditional use permits that allow for outdoor storage or outdoor display when they're on private property. So they're only allowed on private property with a conditional use permit. Also, our policies, even though our policy says you can't generally vend in the right-of-way, they're not enforceable unless it's in the ordinance. So we have some things that we need to clean up with respect to that. And with some changes that were made last year, we did allow mobile vendors on private property if they were invited and if they were selling to employees without a conditional use permit. So that would be for food trucks going to a large employer over the lunch hour. That seemed reasonable. They weren't vending to the public as you would see with a conditional use permit that had outdoor storage on it. So as I stated, we don't have any specific ordinance requirements for mobile vendors right now. Council has asked us to come up with some and asked you to review what they've directed us to do. And throughout this process, we have received input and specifically asked for input, solicited that from our existing food truck vendors. We had 2 licensed ones in Burnsville last year, and then another one has stepped up with interest. So they've been well aware of this discussion. They were part of the council's discussion on February 12th, and I've been in communication with them along the way. So the proposed ordinance, and it was in your background, is that any mobile food vendor, now keep in mind it's not only food, mobile vendor. It's not only food, but it could be merchandise. We've had requests for mobile electronics, and you may have seen these mobile stores that have clothing, household goods, and whatnot. So it's not just food. It could cover anything that's in a truck or vehicle or cart that is out selling things. So we want them to have a license and have the same background check as peddlers and transient merchants. So this is so we know who's in our city and who's selling to who in case we have any issues. We know who this all goes back to. Council wanted specific locations, and when we look at locations for at the staff level, we met with our traffic committee. We have an internal traffic committee made up of engineers and people from our police department and public works. It was decided that we don't want them on collector streets or above. As you know, those are heavily traveled streets. The number one thing here is pedestrian and traffic safety, so we need to keep them on streets where we don't have a lot of conflict with pedestrians or existing traffic. We don't want them in residential areas. And we need them in places that would allow street parking. So they need to comply with the local parking rules. Any location, the only exception for a residential area is if we have a block party. We issue permits for block parties. So if someone is going to block the street, that's fine. They can have a mobile vendors come in. That seems totally reasonable. Or if they're catering a private event like a wedding or a graduation party or something like that. Again, they're invited there and they're only there for a temporary period of time, not vending to the general public. So it certainly seems reasonable. We did hear from our current vendors on Friday about the locations, and they had asked that we look at something that in the industrial park area. That's where a lot of our employers are. That's in the South Cross area, south of 42, west of County Road 5. We're currently looking at that with what locations there would work. And just also let you know, the Minnesota Department of Health and Department of Agriculture regulates food vendors, so we're not looking to get into any food review, safety, sanitation. They have to get a separate license from the state, and we would ask that they give us a copy of that. Just so you're aware, the Department of Health has a regulation that they can only be for 21 days in any given location. So that enforcement of that will rely on the Department of Health. We're just looking at what's an appropriate location in the city, in the right-of-way, if they did want to locate here. And again, as I've said, this ordinance not only addresses food vendors, but also merchandise vendors. So here's the locations that we've come up with that seem reasonable. They're in heart of the city. As you know, heart of the city was designed for pedestrian traffic and more of a grid pattern with on-street parking clearly identified. The areas in red, the first one being on 126th Street adjacent to Nicollet Commons Park, has parallel parking that will have a vending window that can vend to the sidewalk side. That's critical so people aren't crossing the street or standing in the street to buy some food or other merchandise. They need to be on the sidewalk side. Same thing on 125th Street. On the other side of Nicollet, there's some parallel parking there with a sidewalk. That's just to the north of the Park Crest mixed-use building. And like I said, we're looking at sites in the South Cross industrial area that could work for police and for engineering. As far as performance standards, the ordinance suggests that locations have known restrooms and sitting. Not that they have to provide them, but they need to know where they are. If somebody asks or needs a place to sit down, where's the nearest public restrooms? Just that they need to know that. If they're providing food, they need to provide garbage cans. We don't want to have any littering issues with people just picking up their food and eating it and leaving their trash behind. We're allowing up to 2 parking stalls per vendor. Some trucks are longer than others, so we wanted to make sure that it was no more than the 2, but certainly to allow for that. The hours of operation are from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. with a half-hour setup and takedown. These trucks, trailers, or carts cannot be stored on residential properties, and they have to be stored consistent with the code in the commercial area. So again, they need a conditional use permit for outdoor storage. The customer window or customer access, if it's not a window, it's a door, needs to face the curb. And similar to the peddlers and transient merchants, no horns, bells, crying out is allowed. But they can have signage on their vehicle, but not anywhere else. And I need to correct this. So the next step was we're seeking your input on the mobile vending ordinance. There's a separate ordinance that you may be aware of that's being reviewed by the Parks and Natural Resource Commission. council also gave direction for the Parks Department to look at vending in parks. So they talked at great length about that and the purpose of parks, and the direction was given, it makes sense to have these vendors there when there's events in the park, but to have a park be a place where a vendor can set up and sell is not what a park is for. And so the direction was given to accommodate these food vendors when we have events in the park, and the Parks Department and PNRC are working on that. So this ordinance will go to the EDC Economic Development Commission on April 10th, and then it will go to the City Council on April 16th along with that Parks ordinance. And that is the end of my report, Commissioners.
All right. Commissioners, questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a few.
Commissioner Singh?
I have a few questions and some concerns that I've had. I've been thinking about this food trucks selling in the city, and before it gets out of hand, I hope I can make a little meaningful contribution to the discussion. You mentioned the first thing that you said that one of the things you mentioned is about restrooms. Now, if a food truck is operating from, let's say, is being invited by a business and is in that business parking lot, the vendor just telling people where the restrooms are, that's okay.
Commissioners, when they're vending in a parking lot, they need to be invited by the owner of the business, and they're only to be selling to the employees, so
So the
the
employees know.
restroom should be in the office building that they came from.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yes.
Other people are not, will not be served there.
By ordinance, they're not supposed to, but if there's other people that happen to be there, yeah.
Okay. I agree that the business has to invite the vendor or vendors to be in their property and serve food. Is it necessary, or I would suggest that it's necessary that that vendor get that in writing, because it's not a one-day thing. I would assume if they are at Frontier Communications and they were invited by Frontier, they're not only for one day. They will be there for many days. And that it will be done in writing, and that the city get a copy. That's the only way we will know that they were invited. They can tell us that they're invited, but we don't know.
Right.
So, let it be done the correct way.
Okay.
They're invited in writing, and they just give us a copy of it so we know the reason they're there. Regarding advertisements and or signs on the vending truck, are we going to limit, or can a truck all over the truck becomes doesn't look too nice? Are we going to limit their advertisement on the trucks?
Commissioners, as written, no, we're not. I think part of what the mobile vendors do is to attract business to them. That's what they do. And we don't inspect the trucks. We don't, we just, if you suggest that and your colleagues agree, certainly we can bring that to the council, but as a staff person, I would not recommend that. The signage we're suggesting is that they not have any signage outside of their vehicle, trailer, or cart that they're vending from.
Their permit, however, from the city will have to be displayed.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, most times I agree with you, so I'm going to agree with you on this one.
Might take an extra staff member.
My next concern, Jenny, is regarding vendors visiting our parks when athletic associations are having games there. And the athletic associations, as far as I know, sometimes offer food for sale. Probably limited items, but they do offer. If our food trucks, vendors' trucks, are, from what I read the background, they're still allowed to go there, I think I would like to see that they work in collaboration with the athletic association, because the athletic associations, the money they raise they plowed the money back into programs for youth, and they even help with things in the park, like signs and those kinds of things. On the other hand, the vendor trucks would be private. They may contribute, they may not. They don't have to. So I see a little competition here, which I would say the food trucks will provide unfair competition. Any comments on that?
The city council, commissioners, the city council talked about this very issue. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that meeting of February 12th. There certainly was discussion about that because those athletic clubs do support the parks and the park programs that they bring to the parks. And the general consensus from the council is they don't want to compete directly with that, but they do want to fill any gaps in vending that may be at an event. And they talked about, I believe it was Alamagnet, where there's different fields on different ends of the park, and part of that park is not, you wouldn't reasonably be able to walk to the other part of the park to grab a snack or sandwich, you know, in between your innings or something like that. So to be able to provide a vendor in addition to what was there, and not have competing products was discussed at the city council meeting. So that is what the PNRC is reviewing. They had one meeting on it. They've got another meeting to talk about that. That certainly is on the radar when we talk about having them in
I
parks.
hope you have some collaboration.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we're going to be looking for some trouble in the future. So,
Correct.
I think, Jenny, that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Mr. Julik?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Faulkner had a couple of questions. The 21-day location limitation, is that 21 days at a specific location annually, or is it, and then kind of a corollary to that is, what is considered a location? By here, it's fairly tight what the locations could possibly be. Is each one of those places in red considered a separate location, or how do you view the 21-day location limitation?
We've had several conversations with the Department of Health. Again, this is a Department of Health rule, so that we would not be enforcing it. They consider a location to be a jurisdiction. So they would say anywhere in the city of Burnsville for 21 days per, their license lasts a year. I believe it's a calendar year. So, and they are the ones who are enforcing that. So we're just providing a place for people to come and vend, and they certainly have to comply with all other laws and rules.
So, for clarity, any potential vendor would have a maximum allowed number of days to serve Burnsville of 21 days?
That's correct, but that is enforced
For
by
you.
the Department of Health.
Right, right.
We issue an annual license. We don't track where people are on any given day. How this will be enforced is if someone's vending in a place that's not in an approved location and we get a call or a complaint, then certainly we'll ask them to relocate.
Okay.
But the Department of Health keeps track of where they're at. And a location is a jurisdiction. That's a very good question because we had the same question a few weeks ago.
Okay. Thank you. And then in your slide presentation, you had I can't remember which slide, but there was an item 4 and it mentioned the South Cross area.
Yes.
And can you? I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but can you share a little bit more on that?
Sure. That's the area south of 42, west of County Road 5. There's a lot of industrial and office buildings back in there, so there's a lot of employees and a lot of customers to be had for mobile vendors. So I'm in discussions with the police department and engineering department and public works to find a spot that works, that is in the South Cross area, that would allow for mobile vending in the right-of-way. I'm not quite sure where that will be because we have a lot of collector streets that go through there. We've got a lot of streets that have no parking. We have no parking on there because there's a lot of employees and we don't want them parking on the right-of-way. So we're trying to find a spot that works for everybody. I don't have an answer for you today exactly where that will be, but that was one of the comments when we sent out the background to the existing food truck vendors that we've been working with. That was one of their comments. They had 2 comments. One was, can you find something in the South Cross Industrial Park area that'll work? And then what if we're doing a catered event in a residential area? So we're trying to accommodate them.
Okay. Would that South Cross area come through as an ordinance amendment someday or something? Or would it?
Well, if we can find that before this gets to council on April 16th, which is our goal, we will put it on the map that's attached. We have yet to kind of I think what we want to do is adopt the map as part of the ordinance so that council approves these areas, because it gets to be a little controversial where these areas are located, and almost policy-setting issues than an administrative type thing because of where they are located, or could be.
Okay. And then with respect to the performance standards, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. operating hours with the half-hour setup, and is the setup time inclusive of the 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. or?
It would be beginning at 8:30.
8:30. Okay, all right. And then just kind of a suggestion also, would it be possible, you required that they have on-site trash bins. Could we also make a requirement to have recycling bins too?
Absolutely.
Because well, my personal opinion is that should be for all fast food venues also. But if we can start here, I think that would be a good place to start. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Singh?
Mr. Chair, one more question. Now, those locations, the suggested locations in red,
Yes, sir.
now, if those are approved by the city council, and since this is a kind of a new thing for the city, and let's say there's another business in another location that wants to invite the vendors, does that have to go to the city council for approval again, to add locations?
If someone's vending, commissioners, if someone's vending on private property, that needs a conditional use permit. So if a big box retailer or shopping center wanted to have a spot for a food truck out in their parking lot, they need a conditional use permit for outdoor sales. Unless it's someone who's, they're vending to the employees only of a business. We had an issue come up, and that's a change that we added last summer. We had an issue come up, or an inquiry about vending to employees of a retail establishment. Well, that's kind of pushing the intent. So also in your packet, there was changes to the peddlers and solicitors that only allowed it in industrial areas and office buildings in the commercial zoning. The intent is not to just allow anybody to be selling out of a truck in a retail strip mall. That is not. We have rules for that already, and it's a conditional use permit to be able to do that. So that's a good question. We're clarifying that language, so it's for...
The purpose of my asking is that if language can be put in it so that it doesn't probably have to go back to the city council again, or go to the EDC or something like that. Staff can just approve it, probably make it easier.
Vending on private property requires a conditional use permit because it's outdoor sales. So, but if they're going to do it every year, like the fireworks vendors that we see, then they certainly can do that. There is an administrative process for the seasonal sales of the landscaping, the plants, the Christmas trees. There's exceptions for those temporary outdoor sales and farmers market, but not for these type of mobile units. And you're right, Commissioner, saying it's new.
Yeah.
It's new, and so. I think we're trying to accommodate those that have reasonable requests to make sure we understand it. And quite honestly, the market for these in the suburban area is not as ideal as a downtown area. They've been very successful in downtown areas because you get the masses over a short period of time, and so we've got very limited areas that will have that. So we certainly have a lot of activity at Nicollet Commons Park. And in our industrial areas, there's thousands of people that are working there. But other than that, it's a challenge. In our retail locations, there's conflict there with the land use. So we're trying to accommodate them reasonably and walking into this gingerly.
Can you please explain, the Chair, can you please explain the difference between ice cream trucks and food trucks?
Sure. An ice cream truck goes from place to place, door to door, street to street. They're mobile. They're on the move. They're only stopped while they're engaged in that transaction in the right-of-way, and that's the intent. They kind of keep going, and so we've also made a minor housekeeping amendment to this ordinance that does clarify that they are on the move. We've had some inquiries and interpretation issues on this mobile vending. How is this different from an ice cream truck? And our ordinance just doesn't address that. So this mobile food vending will address this situation. So anybody who's parked in the right-of-way, trying to attract customers to them, which is what these units do, are considered a mobile vendor versus an ice cream truck that kind of is driving through neighborhoods and seeks out customers. Good question.
Just for the benefit of the viewing and listening public, the windows from which these trucks will be serving the food will be on the curbside and not on the right-of-way side of any
Correct.
street.
Correct.
Okay. Just for the safety of the people who will be getting their food from the trucks. So
Correct.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Tahiri?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Faulkner. I have questions and some clarifications on this specific item here. Is there any, have we looked at the standard size for these, or city ordinance for the trucks, the weight, length, height for specific items, or vendors, or we are basically go by the business type? 18-foot versus 10-foot. I'm sure there are some site constraints here and parkings and so forth. So that's my one question.
Mr. Singh?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that's not something staff has looked at. We've, as far as we've gone, is to limit the space they're occupying by 2 parking stalls. So if they need to set up a trailer and park or drop the trailer and remove their towing vehicle, they'd be entitled to do that. If they can fit everything into 2 stalls and stay connected, we're open to that. Again, as everybody said, because it's so new, there's a lot of variables, and we're trying to be as open as possible.
I would just add to that, Commissioners, with the different types of vending, there's different types of vehicles. So as Chris said, we're trying to be open, and they've got your standard food truck, and then we've got converted buses and RVs. It could be a wide range of, anything to fit people and things in to sell. When you start to think about merchandise in lieu of food, they kind of get a little longer. So we didn't get into that much detail other than just being able to, 2 spots seemed reasonable, 3 seemed to be a little too much, especially in these locations. We don't have a lot of extra spots.
So these trucks, they sit in that specific locations for, could be up to 20 days or less or more, or are they any specific length time, maximum, minimum? And also, in case these trucks need some less maintenance or support, are we anticipating the second vehicle or any kind of a support possibility in this? Say if one breaks down or get damaged, or anything. I'm trying to just think of what is this one truck by itself would sacrifice all the needs, or if we are anticipating any other problems could arise with these trucks that they need support. I don't know if I'm being clear on
I was
that.
just going to suggest we talk about the overnight parking.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that when we say 21 days, that is not necessarily the same location that is within the city. They can occupy these spaces, as Jenny said, from 8:30 a.m. to set up to 10:30, closing down. They cannot leave the vehicle parked in the street overnight. So it is first come, first served to those spots. There's a chance they may not get the same location 21 days in a row.
But they're moving by 10:30 at night.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the sale of this merchants, these products, do they, just out of curiosity, the city of Burnsville benefit any of these sales or sales tax or profit? Or
Commissioners, we don't collect a local sales tax here, so we don't benefit in that regard. We do collect a small fee to do the background check and process the license, but that's it. They don't pay a special tax or other fee. Right now, the fee, I believe, is $50 on a peddler's and transient merchant license for each employee that's working. So it's very nominal for a year.
Okay, and in case that some of these trucks, for instance, some of the parking lots asphalt are designed for certain weights of trucks, whether 5 or 3 level. If these trucks cause some damages to the parking lot of any of these areas, are they solely responsible for all the for damages and repair? And I know we cover the cleanup, but
Is there a right-of-way permit that would go?
No.
No.
It would just be this license permit, but remember, they're not parking in parking lots. The only places we're talking about are the places in red on the map and maybe a street in the South Cross area. If they park on a private parking lot because they're invited by the owner to sell the lunch, that's a private transaction. We don't get involved in that. But I certainly will pass your comments along to the Parks Director who's working on the park ordinance, because then in that case they would be on city property, and that's something that he would certainly want to be comfortable with.
thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Julick?
Thank you, Chair. Just, I think one last question. As you guys looked at the heart of the city areas where you're going to allow this, I go there once in a while, but not usually during the day. It'd be in the evening. Does people perceive a lack of parking in the area? I know we've got the public ramp there, and obviously there is quite a bit of off-street parking for the various businesses, but has engineering or whomever looked at potential conflicts if those entire areas allotted are completely used up? Is it going to cause parking issues? Or
Yeah, Commissioner Julick, we don't believe so, and we want to draw people to heart of the city, so if this is another amenity that they have that's taking up a parking spot, I think we would welcome that because we want the pedestrian traffic, but at this time, you're correct. There's lots of parking to the north. I'm thinking on the west side of Nicollet, north of the PAC, and then that parking ramp behind Grand Market Square. The other side of Nicollet, it might get a little bit more tight, but just north of 125th Street, there's a small little parking lot, and I don't know that we've ever had any issues with there not being enough parking in that parking lot.
yeah, I think it might be head-in parking on the south side there.
This side is head-in parking,
Yeah, so
and
there's-
this is on-street.
So there seems to be quite a bit of parking there. And I don't know. I don't see when it's really busy, but
Hasn't been an issue that I've ever been brought to my
No,
attention.
it's certainly, those are prime parking spaces.
Yeah.
So when the park is busy, it will be, it'll be interesting to see who gets there first and who gets the stalls.
Part of the parks discussion is there's 2 pads in this park that allow for vending and are set up with the vehicle weights to accommodate such vendors. So there's probably an opportunity when this does get busy in the summertime, if a food vendor wants to secure a permit, which does cost a little bit more money, to guarantee them the spot, they certainly could do that. So there's other options in Nicollet Commons Park for 2 vendors to be there.
oh, that you're saying that would be allowed by this or
Yes.
after the park? Okay.
I believe so. Right now, there's 2 pads that can be leased by vendors, so.
All right. And just one last, and maybe this hasn't even been a consideration, but how do these guys get it out there that they're there?
Facebook, Twitter, social media.
But just standard advertising. There's nothing
Yeah,
that
no bullhorn.
would allow them to. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner
Yes, I have one other question. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
Have we done, as a city, any study of the areas that they already operate in this kind of operations? If there are any history of complaints or comments or anything that help us to do's and don'ts
Sure,
in this
Commissioners.
operation?
I mean, Minneapolis and St. Paul have very specific food truck ordinances, and they have their own health departments. And Minneapolis ordinance is pretty long on this. So we looked at what other cities did. We also looked at some across the country to get a broader perspective, and they're more common in urban areas, of course, than suburban areas. So we have looked at them and extracted some of the requirements that others, like the trash. The trash one is something that we probably would not have thought of, but for looking at another city's ordinance, because someone probably had an issue with the trash, for instance. Yeah.
Commissioner Singh?
I can tell you, as long as it did come to the planning commission, trash.
we take care of that because businesses we deal with, and one of the things we have to be careful of is that businesses don't have trash left outside and those kinds of things. Along the line of Commissioner Tahiri's question, have you had any feedback from businesses that sell food? What is their feedback towards this? This is for some, especially in the heart of the city, near the PSC area, it could be seen as competition to other, to like restaurants. So that we don't get into conflict between the food vendors and the restaurants later, especially in the middle of summer. Have you had any feedback from them, from the restaurant owners that have been there?
Yeah, Commissioners, we have not heard good nor bad from any of our existing brick and mortar restaurants. In other cities, certainly that's an issue, and we read about that in the paper every now and again. The argument about a tax-paying brick and mortar restaurant versus a mobile restaurant, as you raised the point, Commissioner Tahiri, about they don't pay taxes, but that argument comes up a lot in the media, and you read about it here and there, and I believe it's a very real argument, but we have not heard from that. The point to allow them in these urban areas, there's not a restaurant on 126th Street. It's close to JoJo's on 125th Street and Mediterranean Cruise, but I believe the vendors, at least that we're talking to, have different food options than what's already there. So I don't know that it would be a conflict if they were there. And 21 days, as we're regulated by the state, St. Paul and Minneapolis, because they have their own health department, have different requirements for how long somebody can be somewhere. And so they may experience more of those issues than we would with the 21-day rule that applies to Burnsville.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? I just had, and I think maybe I know the answer, but I think I see a discrepancy, or I'm confused, I guess, under the proposal under 3-20-2 license required. It says mobile vendors licensed under this chapter do not need city-issued peddlers or transient merchant licenses when operating on streets or right-of-ways, but they do if they are on private property. Is that what you were talking about with the CUP for the private property
Correct.
versus the right-of-way difference?
Correct. You're exactly correct. It's not a conflict, and we're putting that in there for clarification. So if someone's vending in the right-of-way, they need the mobile vending ordinance. If they're on private property, then they need the transient merchant license. And under the transient merchant license, there may be exemptions from a CUP if they're vending to the employees, or if they want to vend to the general public, then they need a conditional use permit from the city.
Okay. So, so if they were doing both, they'd have to get both licensures.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's what
And Commissioners, we're working on the application and the fee. I believe our intent is to make this as simple as possible because the rules get pretty complicated as you weave them in and out, as you've kind of just alluded to. I think what we're working on is one application, and they can just check the box, and then we're looking at the fee structure, and if the background check is the same for both, how does that fee structure work? So we're looking into that, so it's a simple process for
So
the
if they wanted to do both, they basically pay one fee and get both licensures.
Exactly.
Type thing.
Exactly.
Okay, great. I don't have anything else. Any other questions or anything? All right. Comments, discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have one last question.
Sure.
For this operation, the city doesn't have any specific limitation to kind of food, whether it's processed, cooked, pre-cooked or Chinese buffet, for example. Are we open to everything and anything, or we are?
From the city's standpoint, we are. Obviously, the health department has certain criteria. It may be the health department or the Department of Agriculture on how the food is prepped and stored, but the city wasn't interested in getting into those criteria.
You wouldn't have the
The-
staff to
correct.
to look after something like that.
Not for a $50 fee.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I thank you for your input, and I know the city council thanks you. We're kind of paving new territory here, so no other suburban cities that we looked at in the metro really have allowed for this because they're not set up. So thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Go ahead.
Sorry, it seems like one question causes another question. We kind of are neutral. It's mobile vending ordinance. Do we put food anywhere specifically? I mean, do we limit it to food? Because because theoretically I could be vending whatever trinkets or is there something specific that states it's got to be a food type thing?
Nope, Commissioner's quite the opposite. It's open-ended, so if somebody wanted to sell electronics or the boutique clothing that's sold out of a vehicle of some sort, or off of a cart if they're selling scarves or something like this, it is meant to be open-ended. The requirements for trash and the Department of Health approval or Ag approval are for food trucks only, those items that are specific. If that's a recommendation that you want to pass on to the council, we certainly can do that.
No, I'm just trying to understand if the intent was to allow for any vendor.
Correct. Our thought was, once we have it for food, then the next thing's going to come along and to change the ordinance. The practicality is that that's what's most popular today, but the rules are pretty much the same no matter what they're selling that for traffic and safety.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Thought I was out of here and everything was
we were
good.
done.
Yeah.
What policy we have in place to cover complaints? Let's say we sell a product to an individual that is damaged or not satisfied and want to return, and conflict starts. And as long as they're under city jurisdiction here.
Commissioners, just like you would in a regular store, we don't get involved in those private transactions. So if you've got a complaint with a product, that's between you and the business that you purchased it from. If you get sick, the Department of Health regulates the food and the food quality, so then your complaints go to the Department of Health. We don't license businesses in Burnsville, just a few: alcohol, tobacco, liquor. There's just a handful that we license. So.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, do we need a motion on this?
It's a recommendation, and so
For Mr. Slaney, Mr. Chair, did this go to the Economic Development Commission, is it?
It has not. It's going on the 10th,
Okay.
and then they too will have a recommendation, and then to the council on the 16th.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the mobile vending ordinance, as well as the changes to the existing peddlers, solicitors, and transient merchant ordinance.
so moved by Commissioner Singh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tahiri. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. And we'll move on to the next commission. All right. Item number 6 is updates. Staff?
Commissioners, I do have one thing, if I can backpedal a little bit. We had a vote on the previous meeting minutes of March 11th, but I did not get a motion or a second.
Oh, sorry. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes from the March 11th, 2013?
So moved that we adopt the minutes.
Second.
Second, moved by Commissioner Julik, seconded by Commissioner Singh. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0, I believe.
Right. And one other thing, I believe this was my error. Ms. Faulkner pointed it out. I don't know that the Planning Commission can convert Commissioner White to a voting member, because that's appointed by the council. So although he will be voting at every meeting likely, he still has to remain an alternate. So I will correct that as we move forward.
With that, any other updates from staff?
No other updates other than the agenda for the next meeting.
All right. Anything else from commissioners? With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Julik, second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Singh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned, 4-0.